this show on the road. There we go. Now we've got some dice. A little bit of a slow start for us today. We apologize. Looks like Nick will be on the play in game 1. So, I believe they have already resolved mulligans. So now that Kevin is back up here...
I think they just drew their initial 7.
Okay. So we will go ahead and start the timer. We just stomped to let them know we're ready.
Yeah.
And get them going.
I'm not sure how this matchup is going to go. I don't really know a lot about Shawn's deck. Nick's deck I know pretty well from playtesting and stuff. But it's funny and it's spicy, especially with knowing what his sideboard is.
I think from what I've seen of the Shared Fate deck, if Shawn can have aggressive draws, I feel like he'll be kind of in the lead. I think the Shared Fate deck kind of has could have some stumbles in the early game, especially with some of the mana limitations that he has. So Nick leads on a untapped Steve Vents into a Serum Visions. Looked like he topped one, bottom one, and now Shawn is aggressively fetch shocking for, let's see what he gets. I think I see Bloodbraid Elves in his deck.
I assume that he would have those in there. I mean, I can't imagine on the first FNM that they're unbanned that he wouldn't be playing them.
That's definitely fair. That is a Narnum Renegade. That is the Death Touch Curd Ape.
Aha. I'm glad I'm with somebody who knows their cards better.
That just comes from watching way too much Magic. And a Mountain and a Pass from Nick.
He's going to usually hold up for instant speed stuff. He's got Think Twices and Mana Leak and things like that.
Yeah, he very much, the early game for him is very much kind of Grixis control leading into the actual spice of the deck, which is Shared Fate.
Basically, his deck is a do-nothing deck that just attempts to kill creatures and keep your opponent from winning, and then Shared Fate swaps decks with your opponent. So you start drawing their win conditions, and they do nothing.
Ooh, and there Shawn has another Narnum Renegade. He is down to 16 from the fetch.
And then we're going to see the Think Twice.
Looks like he drew another land. And another land. What's
Narnum Renegade's power and toughness right now?
Narnum Renegade is currently a 2/3. It is
okay,
a
that's what I thought.
1/2 Death Touch for 1 with Revolt. If you have Revolt activated, it gets a +1/+1 counter when it comes in.
Okay, I think Languish is -4/-4, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so he still can. He has Languish in his deck, so he can still wipe the board. But obviously, he's got to get up to the mana for that.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't see what he put in his hand there.
Languish would definitely be a good play here. Obviously, he's still a couple turns off of it.
Sure.
But I believe I saw Basic Swamp in his hand already, and I know he has a Flooded Strand. So, in theory, he has turn 4 Languish mana if he wants it.
There we go. There's the Inquisition.
And Shawn has a
bunch of lands.
Grip full of lands. That is the card left in his hand is a Goreclan Rampager. I recognize that art. I'm not 100% sure on what was binned.
I'll go check really quickly so we know what the card is for the future.
Yeah. Plays the Copperline Gorge. Last turn, then you can get value out of it coming in untapped. The little Renegades are just bringing in the beats. Slowly but surely. 2 power, Not a whole lot, but as anybody that's ever played Eternal formats can tell you, two power can win the game pretty easily.
The bend card was a Flint of Boar.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
This is probably going to be kind of a weird night anyway because of the unbanned cards. People are going to be playing some stuff that maybe hasn't been played as much before.
Yeah, that's we definitely run the risk of that happening. I imagine we're going to see a fair share of Bloodbraid Elf and probably a decent number of Jaces. We do have a lot of players here that already play Legacy and other formats, so they would already have access to Jaces. So it'll be interesting to see what people are playing. So Nick plays an Ashiok, which Ashiok's a pretty good card, but I'm not actually sure Shawn cares. Because I think most of the creatures in Shawn's deck, from what we've seen, are aggressive creatures that. Oh, there's the Bloodbraid. And Cascade into Culligan's Command. That is about the best thing you could possibly cascade into. Now, the question's going to be, what modes do they choose? I imagine it's going to be probably 2 to the Ashiok, and then discard a card from Nick's hand. Or is... Oh, he's just... Okay, so he is redirecting. That makes sense. Because now the Bloodbraid Elf can take out the Ashiok on its own, barring 1 mana removal.
Actually, the ruling has been changed, right? You don't have to redirect anymore?
I believe what they decided with the ruling is that there are going to be cards printed in the future that specifically say they target Planeswalkers. So, or I guess to be even more specific, burn spells that specifically target Planeswalkers. Because right now you do see the occasional like Hero's Downfall and stuff that will say Planeswalker.
Sure.
But I think the main goal is they want to kind of get rid of some of the ambiguity of whether or not you have to cast it at them and redirect versus just casting it at the Planeswalker.
Yeah, I was thinking they changed it because with Leyline of Sanctity, that doesn't protect your Planeswalkers currently. I don't believe.
Yes.
Because you can directly target the Planeswalker itself rather than redirecting.
Which I think is a pretty smart change, because Leyline of Sanctity is already a beating for a lot of these targeted burn decks and such.
Yes.
Shawn rolling dice for fun.
And Nick is at Shared Fate mana, but I don't know if he has it in hand or not. It appears that he doesn't.
Oh, we got a reader. Somehow I feel like this is not the last time this is going to happen.
That card is Dark Deal. It's 2 and a black, and each player discards their hand and then draws that many cards -1. So it lets you change up your hand
and
a bit.
I believe we have a scoop.
Yeah, gonna have to assume that Nick conceded on that one.
I'm not quite sure what he thought to hit there. It definitely seemed like Languish was probably his one out, but he couldn't draw into Languish there. Would not have had enough mana available. So now we're going into sideboarding. What do you think? So you've seen Nick's sideboard. What do you think he's bringing in?
I'm not sure, because he has.
To guess.
It looks like he's bringing in a lot of cards. So first, obviously, I'm going to guess that he's bringing in Blood Moons. It's obviously not as good in this matchup as in some. It's not just an instant win card, but it is going to cut off a fair amount of cards because Shawn is, I'm sure, playing mostly non-basics. I feel like he can't aggro out because he's got 4 young pyromancers and 4
I think
Delver
I see
of
the young
Secrets.
pyromancers.
And that I wouldn't think Delver though.
No,
Can't tell what
he's
that last-
not.
okay.
He's not bringing in the
Yeah,
full,
young
in the full
pyromancer
creature
because that's
suite.
gonna get you more value, which is what I think he needs here. Delver is just
I almost think this is the kind of matchup where he might not want to be on the shared fate plan. He might just want to double down on playing this kind of Grixis control style, and just let young pyromancer be his win con instead of kind of cheesing his opponent out.
and that's entirely possible. He may have just straight up taken shared fate out of his deck at this point.
So it'll be interesting. Shawn is deeply in deliberation.
He probably honestly has no idea what Nick is trying to do, because Nick is one of those guys. He doesn't come often anymore. He just has a lot of other stuff going on. But pretty much every time he comes, he brings a different deck, and they're often cards like Dark Deal, where everybody has to read them and nobody knows what they does. The only reason I know it is because I picked those cards up for him the other day after we discussed it.
There's definitely value in being the playtest partner.
Yeah. And that was actually why he decided to play Shared Fate tonight instead of he's been playing the is it Panharmonicon? Untap all your stuff, like artifact combo deck. He had been playing that, but he felt like Shared Fate needed something, and I thought of the
Dark Deal.
yeah.
Okay.
Because it can close out some of the stuff, because stuff in your opponent's hand he can only get with Thoughtseize or Inquisition of Kozilek. So he doesn't have a lot of ways to get rid of their hand, but that just straight up discard the whole thing. So if they've got a mitt full of good cards, they have the potential of drawing less good cards.
Well, then obviously when the Shared Fate comes down,
Shared Fate comes down,
for those that don't know what Shared Fate does, Shared Fate is a 5-mana enchantment that when a player would draw a card, they instead exile the top card of their opponent's deck, and then that card is they're allowed to look at that card and play that card. So you basically turn the top of your opponent's deck into your deck, and then vice versa. They get to play off the top of your deck. One of the valuable things that you can do with it is once you go empty-handed, and you're strictly playing off the top of your deck, as we mentioned in the previous game, Nick's deck does a lot of not a lot. There's a lot of cantrips. It kind of plays like it almost seems like a suboptimal Grixis control list. So there's some cantrips that don't really do a whole lot, and then you've got basically just removal.
That's a good way to put it, that it basically is just a bad control deck with no... Obviously, he's sided in some creatures now, but his main deck has no way to win the game. It has no direct damage. It has no creatures. There is nothing that your opponent can draw to win. And even if you play a second Shared Fate, it doesn't say anything like trade decks with your opponent or trade or anything like that. It's you just start exiling their cards. So you are still you, and your opponent is still your opponent. So even you could have 3 or 4 Shared Fates on the battlefield, and it doesn't do any more than having 1.
All right. So on Shawn's side, Nick just played an Inquisition of Kozilek. So Shawn, we see, has Tarmogoyf, Culligan's Command, Maelstrom Pulse, Collective Brutality. I believe that is another Flinthoof Boar, and 2 lands. That's actually, I would say that's probably a pretty good start from Shawn. I imagine he will probably lead on the fetch. He probably gets a red source off of this fetch, and then next turn, Flinthoof Boar will likely go a Tuscan.
Trying to see what's in Nick's hand. Okay, I believe that's Dark Deal on top.
And
Is that Fatal Push?
believe that is a Fatal Push. Okay, so Shawn did get a Stomping Ground, so he's down to 19. Interestingly, Nick has had a very safe on his life total start so far with double basics. Now, I believe we saw him put the Blood Moons back in his deck box, so I don't think he brought the Blood Moons in.
Okay.
I honestly am not a huge fan of the Blood Moons in this kind of matchup, because I don't think it negatively affects Shawn an extensive amount. Okay.
Yeah, it depends on what Shawn ends up doing.
Yeah. So Shawn played Collective Brutality with the mode being the Duress mode. So he gets to take a look at Nick's hand and take an instant or sorcery out of it. So the question is, what does he value more? It looks like he's trying to decide between the Hero's Downfall and the Fatal Push. Obviously, he can't take the Ashiok, and he probably doesn't care about the Languish, considering that Nick doesn't have a third land.
Is that what the card is in the back? The Languish.
Yeah, that was promo Languish. Or I guess just
the promo is full art.
So it's just a foil. Let's see if Nick drew a land. No, but he drew a Think Twice.
That was a young Pyromancer, I believe.
This is not looking particularly good for Nick.
No, it is not, unfortunately.
For fans of the spicy brew, please look away now.
There's the Flint Hoof Boar.
Yep. Boar incoming. So 17 all. Shawn's damage self-inflicted, and Nick's damage, unfortunately, Flint Hoofed.
Well, at least he can cast the young Pyromancer now.
I'm not sure if he is going to cast Young Pyromancer or if he would rather Hero's Downfall. Oh, he's going with the other option of playing the Ashiok. That is a Goblin Rabblemaster. Ooh. That's... If he can manage to play the Goblin Rabblemaster off the Ashiok, that will be pretty good.
What's the CMC on Goblin Rabblemaster?
Goblin Rabblemaster is a 3.
Yeah, and Kiora. I have Kiora in my mind too much. Ashiok can -3 to put that onto the battlefield. So that's pretty solid.
It's specifically, it's a -X to play.
Yes.
To put a creature.
And now she's dead.
Yeah, the Culligan's Command already being in the hand kind of spelled doomed there. I'm almost a little surprised that Shawn didn't just use the Maelstrom Pulse. Seems to me like Maelstrom Pulse would have been a good play there. I guess he wanted to get his Tarmogoyf back. Which that's also fairly useful here, especially with a Planeswalker on Nick's side already in the graveyard. Believe the Goyf is currently a, I think, land Planeswalker instant sorcery, because there's an Inquisition. So I think it's a 4/5.
Very reasonable size.
Pretty good 2-mana investment.
And out of reach of a Languish.
That'd be interesting, Ghosty Hosty. I'm not sure how much I enjoy the Hollow One decks, but Modern is definitely... I enjoy Modern. And it's definitely a fun format for people of all kinds, because you can play your pet decks. You can also you can net deck, kind of just whatever you feel like doing.
Nick is down to 12.
Nick is down to 12.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Flint Hoof. Flint Hoof going to town. It's okay. So Goyf is a 4/5. We were correct. Glad I was keeping track. It's not looking good for Team Shared Fate.
This is really sad. But Nick goes into this knowing that it's not the best deck. it's just a fun thing, and typically your opponents, whenever you cast Shared Fate, it usually gets read at least 3 to 4 times throughout the game because you cast it and your opponent reads it, and then they read it again later and read it again later, and they're like, man, is there any way out of this? And the answer is no. Unless you've got it in hand, you don't have it. So
okay, well, I believe Shawn fired off a lightning bolt at the young pyromancer, to which Nick responded with his hero's downfall. So Big Bad Goyf is off the table, which is good for Nick. And he does have that one token.
So he's got a blocker, and he's got the mana for Shared Fate, and Shawn is running low on cards, but one of those cards is Maelstrom Pulse. So,
also interestingly, Nick still has that Languish.
Yes.
So Shawn can't overly commit to the board, because anything that he plays that's 4 toughness or less is probably just going to get mopped up by that Languish. So it'll be interesting to see what Shawn has. We know he has Bloodbraid Elves. We've seen.
It kind of looked like a Goblin Guide there.
Goblin Guide would be an interesting.
The card that he's touching looked like a Goblin Guide, but I'm not 100% if that's what it was.
The real question is, does Shawn even want to play other creatures right now?
I would think no. That he wouldn't, because of he knows about the Languish.
Considering that he knows the Languish is there, there is. Ooh, that is a Gore Clan Rampager activation. So that gives the Flinthoof Boar +4/+4 and Trample, which not only makes short work of the chump block token, but also takes a hefty chunk out of Nick's life total. I definitely agree. Shared Fate would be hilarious with a Cyclonic Rift Overload clause in it, but I'm not sure if that card would ever make it to print, unfortunately. Alright, so Thoughtseize from Shawn is met by a Terminate from Nick. So he does get a token, but he loses the Languish. And Flinthoof Boar finally has met his match.
I'm surprised that Nick has stayed in it this long, just with the state of things.
It really, I think this game is a pretty good indicator of the power that young Pyromancer can bring to the table. Because I think the young Pyromancers have done a very good job of keeping Nick in the game. Shawn did have another Flinthoof Boar. So that was the unknown card in his hand. So
now we have a clear battlefield. Maelstrom Pulse, only card in hand for anyone.
It's a Raven's crime. Woo!
Oh, goodness.
I appreciate your pun, Ghosty Hosty. I appreciate the pun. Oh, man. And Shawn just draws another creature. And it looked like Nick drew a land that spells his doom. Oh. Floats 5 mana, shows the land, and that's the game.
Then we've got a Dark Deal and Shared Fate. So if he could have held out just a little bit longer, Nick probably had that. Now somebody else is reading Dark Deal.
I'm not 100% sure what creature ended it for Shawn.
Was that
Ethan just shaked it in front of the camera.
Yeah, it was the one that I came up and told you about, but I don't remember what it does. It's like 1 and then 3 hybrid green-red.
Rubble Belt Raider?
That doesn't sound right, but I'm not sure.
Or is it an OG Ravnica card? All I know is
we'll have to look.
It could be. All I know is it definitely has 3 power and it definitely has haste and it is definitely green-red. So we will go down. We'll see if we have anybody else that we can grab for a match. Considering that went pretty quick, we might be able to snag a game 3 to go on camera. So we will. Oh, congrats, Ghosty Hosty. We will go and see if we have an extra game real quick, and we will be right back.